Hello and welcome once again to It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. I'm your host, Frank Weber. So glad you could join me once again in the forest this week. This is now episode number 70, I believe. I know I'm always counting these milestones, and it is something of a chore, especially in an unguested podcast like this. It's something of a chore to get topics to you every week, and sometimes I have to think long and hard about them, and maybe I put too much elaboration on some things and not enough on others, but I've come up with a lot of things this week, a lot of things that are thought-provoking and perhaps based on some experience as well. It's now August, and I could think of a number of things to talk about just on that fact alone. Of course, the month is known for its heat, and apparently we're going to be getting some heat and some dry weather here finally later this week. I have some weather-related issues, or stories, I should say, for later in the show, but I'm not going to talk about the fact that August is also NFL preseason time, which to me is kind of maybe the fakiest part of the NFL season, fakier than the regular season and the playoffs have become. Not going to talk about that. Not going to talk about school starting too early again for the K through 12, which it is. I think in Texas probably next week. But I guess there's probably districts out there that are starting even earlier, which is crazy. Or why the pool is closing too early as a result of that. Play here in Canyon at the bottom of the Palo Duro Canyon called Texas, which is the official state play of Texas, is closing early this year because of school starting so early, if that makes sense. I think this is the last week already, and I don't know. I could go into a lot of discussions on that. I have some other people, some other celebrities who have also died in the last week, and I did a big tribute show last week for a bunch of people. I may give a quick shout out, a quick mention here at the end of the show today. It's crazy how everybody's dying all of a sudden. And then I could talk about, as a red-blooded American male, I could talk about the American Eagle ad with Jeannie Sweeney advertising their jeans. I'm pretty much simpatico with a lot of like-minded people that it's wonderful that this is happening and that American Eagle is standing their ground from the woke attacks on their ad and their product. Jeannie Sweeney, of course, if you're not familiar, is a young actress, blondish, blue eyes, white, just happens to be an ideal candidate to advertise their jeans, as advertisers have tended to do over a long period of time. They will get a beautiful person or somebody typically thought of as beautiful, perhaps a celebrity, to sell their jeans. And the fact that she's doing this is a return or a reversal back to a celebration of beauty. In the eyes of many people, our culture needs to return to beauty and works of art, literature, all that sort of thing, a sense of awe, AWE, if you will. And advertisers have used people, paid them, of course, to advertise their products for many years. One thing people have brought up was the old Cindy Crawford Pepsi ads from 30 years ago as a comparison example. And I think it's wonderful. The ad itself is really not that provocative. She shows a little cleavage. There's a little butt shot there with her jeans on, of course. And it's really not provocative or overly sexualized or anything. And she's explaining about her jeans and not really forcing you to buy her jeans. But at the end, there's a statement that says, Jeannie Sweeney has good jeans, meaning the jeans from American Eagle. And there's some wokesters out there who think this is some kind of Nazi Aryan race propaganda or some crazy nonsense. So it's great that certain companies are returning to this and they're taking a stand, as American Eagle is. I think it's wonderful. I'm personally, if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, I'm not as big a fan of clothing in general these days, although you know that you have to have it in many situations, of course, to keep the peace and not offend a lot of people, if you will. But these wokesters and their way of life has gotten a little bit too out of control in my lifetime, and I guess my biggest thing is they promote change for the sake of change, and almost want to remake humanity into their own image, if you will. And it's crazy to me because human nature, with our human nature, some changes are good, but there's a lot of changes that are not so good. And these people, as Merle Haggard said in that song, Fight Inside of Me, they preach some other way of living. And we can make good changes in our lives, but there's a lot of changes that just don't work with our nature. We need something else or someone else to come in and change our hearts. And a lot of times that's not going to be done through insults and coercion and forcing people into this other view of life. And so I definitely applaud Sydney and American Eagle for trying to change the tide back. And that's about all that I really can say about it and all I need to say about it. I think it's a beautiful ad. Can't remember if I said it's not particularly provocative in a sexual way, although I know sex sells in advertising. I can't remember. Did I say there's a little cleavage and there's a little butt shot with the jeans on, of course. You know, I mean, there's nothing, no nudity or anything there. But I appreciate that, and I hope other companies will follow suit. Victoria's Secret in particular comes to mind. They've went off the deep end here a few years ago. A lot of other people who are like-minded with me have already commented on that. So, and I should add before I completely switch gears here, sometimes my commentary is kind of all over the place if you haven't noticed already on this show, but I really appreciated the use of the double entendre in the ad. Sydney Sweeney has good genes, which of course stated meant the blue genes, but it could also mean that she had good genes in terms of genetics and parenting and stuff like that, which I think is where the wokesters went crazy and thought this was some kind of Adolf Hitler thing, which is quite a leap of judgment to go after this in that regard. Pretty unfair, to say the least, and very judgmental. But I applaud you, Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle Outfitter, and I'm about to change topics into something a little bit deeper here. So I get the feeling sometimes that many of you don't like it when I tell weather stories. I could be wrong about that, but there were several things that happened in the last week that I needed to point out, and I think the right word is synthesize, put together into a greater structured thought process regarding the weather that has taken place in Texas this year, including where I've lived, and some other issues relating to the Kerrville floods in particular, not to be controversial or anything like that, but I feel like a lot of people don't have a really great sense of reality, which sometimes, unfortunately, is very harsh and unfair, and perhaps feels judgmental toward those of us who are victimized, perhaps in some way, or feel unfairly treated, if that makes sense. There was a lot of people may not know that Texas is currently in a special legislative session because we have a clearly defined legislative session every 2 years that lasts for like 160 days in the spring. That ended like in May or June, and the governor called a special session that I believe started on the 21st of July. And they're only supposed to talk about like one thing, but they wind up talking about other things during these sessions. And there was I saw on the news the other night, there was a lady who I guess had lost a daughter, at least one daughter, I don't know if it was more, who was testifying in front of the state committee about the need for a better weather warning system, and if such a thing had actually been in place, or if it actually had ever existed, which is why I'm going to talk about this, that her daughter and everybody else's daughters and maybe sons, I don't know if there were any sons that died as well, might still be alive today. It was obviously a very emotional testimony, and nobody is downplaying or trying to make light of the loss of her daughter and loss of a loved one. By any means, we're very sympathetic to that. Terrible thing to lose a child, especially a child that presumably had a lot of life left to live. But we don't know why these things happen, and there is a certain mystery to life and some other things that I'll get into here. But in the same hearing that she was having in front of the legislature, she basically felt some kind of insult regarding this idea that some sort of preventive system doesn't really take place, and there was no way to actually prevent the floods and all the death that occurred, which is the position that I have taken on this show a couple of times here in the last few weeks since it happened on the 4th of July, when the Kerrville floods or Hunt floods down on the Guadalupe River took place, and a lot of rain in the middle of the night, and the camp's right next to the river, and the river went way above its banks, and a lot of people drowned and were carried off in the floods. Terrible event, obviously. But let me give you a little bit of a history on what's actually been going on with weather forecasting in recent years, and especially this year and some of my experiences, and then I'll tie it back into this. But I don't want anybody to ever get the idea that I'm, opposing this lady and not sympathetic to her loss or anything like that. I mean, but there are other things to consider here. That's basically what I'm telling you. So last week, this is a little bit unrelated to weather per se, but about a week ago on Monday or Tuesday, there was an earthquake off the coast of Russia, the Pacific Ocean. I guess it's maybe not quite right by where it hits or almost hits Alaska, but maybe a little bit more southeast or whatever. So whenever there's an earthquake in the water now, they issue a tsunami warning, and apparently they issued the warning for what was basically the entire Pacific Ocean, which, for those of you who don't have a lot of geographic perspective, but I imagine you probably do, you're a smart person listening to my show, the Pacific Ocean is a very, very large ocean. If you've ever been on a flight from Las Vegas or the California coast to Hawaii, it's a long ways out to Hawaii, like 6 hours. And if you go even further out to, say, the Philippines, as I have, or Japan or Australia or whatever, it's much, much longer. The Pacific Ocean is a very big ocean. So when they have an earthquake below the ocean and they issue tsunami warnings, it doesn't make sense to have the warning for the entire ocean. It's going to take a long time to get from southeast Russia to Hawaii, much less California. And while the tsunami may raise the waves a little bit, by the time it gets there, it's like maybe 1 foot higher. and it may raise the waves and make the water choppier closer to the earthquake, but you can see how it will be diminished by the time it reaches U.S. territories like Hawaii and the mainland. And it's not actually a big wall of water that's going to swallow up the entire island. Anyway, the point of all that is that there's a lot of emotion that goes into that kind of warning. I don't know why it's become so emotional. A lot of people don't understand what a tsunami really is. And in fact, I probably still don't either, but it's not the same thing as a tidal wave or a wall of water, generally speaking. We've kind of gotten into that in regards to our weather forecasting as well. We have a lot more watches and warnings now than we used to in the weather zeitgeist, if you will. And I get frustrated because sometimes if we have a severe thunderstorm in our county or heading toward our county, they will sometimes issue the warning for the entire county, even though it doesn't actually affect, as far as we can tell, it won't affect the entire county. And so then we feel under the gun, and are we going to get hit with hail again? Are we going to get hit with a tornado? That sort of thing. Sometimes it's too broad. Sometimes the warnings don't happen quickly enough. I can kind of see that as well. But I want to give a personal story to really illustrate my point. Is I also said right after the floods that a lot of the weather forecasters and meteorologists, they sadly don't know a lot. They sadly don't know jack shit about where a storm is going to go, where it's going to appear, what exactly it will do. You know, when it comes to hail and tornadoes, they can see some of that stuff on radar, but that doesn't mean that it's actually taking place on the ground. Hail, for instance, sometimes it will melt entirely by the time it reaches the ground. And then tornadoes, of course, may come part way out of the clouds, but don't really go low enough to really do any damage and that sort of thing, which makes things really confusing as well. But let me give you an illustration here from my personal experience, because we had what seemed like could have been a close call again this past weekend, early Sunday morning. And we already had a situation on an early Sunday morning 2 months ago where we did get hit with a lot of hail and some damaging winds and have to fix up the house. I just got my roof, in fact, fixed last week, and I got on it kind of early because there's going to be a big rush to get all the roofs fixed here as soon as school starts. So let me go ahead and tell you the story. So June 7th at the 10 o'clock news, we're watching the news, and there's a big storm to our northwest that apparently has hail in it. And I was watching a particular channel and a young meteorologist, and the consensus, both her belief and then the models, these forecast models, by the way, they don't know. Let me go. Let me talk about that in a second. But anyway, there's a storm to our northwest about 10:30 or whatever. It's believed that it'll kind of die out and not go anywhere. But it gets to our backyard about 2:30 in the morning. Still has a lot of hail in it. I think it was like 3-inch hail. Damaged our roof, damaged some windows. Downed a lot of limbs, that sort of thing. And now I'm just starting to get my house back in order, as I was saying. Got the roof fixed last week. And so this past Saturday night, that was August 2nd, going into August 3rd, there was a storm that had been severe up to our northwest. It's actually like a couple of little storms, right? And it was believed that it was going to die out at some time very quickly after the news and not be an issue. Well, 1:30 in the morning, we start seeing lightning, and there's a storm in our backyard again. It happens to be another Sunday morning, about 8 weeks later. And fortunately, and this time, by the way, this was the same news channel, but with the chief meteorologist who has a lot of experience and everything. But this storm comes up on on us this last morning, and I just had the roof fixed. Thankfully, by the time it got here, it wasn't severe anymore. There was never any warnings or anything, and that was a good thing. It didn't even rain that hard, and we were lucky we survived, because if it had been a similar situation, it would have been complete deja vu, as they say. But this is the problem with a lot of forecast models. If you watch the Weather Channel models for any length of time, for instance, they can't accurately tell you even an hour out where a storm is going to be an hour from now, or what exactly it will do when it gets to, if and when it gets to wherever it's going. So the predictive nature of this profession, despite supposed increases in technology, is still not all that good. And you can't rely on future forecasts 24 to 48 hours out for sure, but even half an hour out, it's not even that great. It has something to do with the way nature works, the way perhaps God works. We don't understand it all entirely. There's a certain mystery to it. So if you can't predict where a storm is going to be, where it might pop up, what exactly it's going to do, my logic is that it's not going to be, you're going to have a very difficult time using that to prevent any catastrophes from happening. Usually the emergencies and the catastrophes that do happen are simply not predictable. And that's why I tell people that the flooding in Kerrville, flooding in Hunt down there in Kerr County, simply could not have been avoided. And I know that doesn't sound very sympathetic, doesn't sound very empathetic, as a lot of people like to say these days, but that's where they are in weather forecasting. They can try to forecast things, and it works out well for a majority of people, but it doesn't work out for everybody. And that's where I would take issue with some of the politics and some of the arguments that are going on right now, that the whole situation was somehow preventable down there and on the Guadalupe River. I could even get into more controversy on this. As a Christian and a student of the Bible, it doesn't really, I don't know if a lot of people understand the concept of God's sovereignty. And that doesn't just mean that he's powerful, he's all powerful, and he can do whatever he wants. But all of us, for lack of a better descriptor, we all have a number. And when it's called, that's it for us, regardless of where we happen to be in life and what we've managed to accomplish or experienced or not experienced. Even the youngest among us. I even remember actually as a kid going through one of the cemeteries down by the farm where, part of my family's from, and seeing some of the tombstones there. I mean, there were little babies who died within a few hours or a day, and it was really sad. You're like, how can that happen? But the reality is that we don't have any control over when we're going to go, and we can always wonder till the day is bright and the night is dark to figure out why that is, why some of us live these long, great lives and accomplish all this stuff, and others of us are called out early. And it's one of life's biggest mysteries, but we will know the answers to that all someday. And I hope that you will seek God, seek Jesus, and ask Him for wisdom, because He does give that very freely. And I may not be the best talker on that, but I do feel like I know used to know. But you just have to kind of listen, and you have to kind of live life there. And I hope that makes some sense to you. I don't have all the answers, but I try to put things in a certain perspective anyway. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed my story, or hopefully you kind of understand. There's just something off about meteorology and weather's predictive nature, and can they really truly predict it? It just doesn't seem like they can to me. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and no, actually, we're going to still do a real shout out real quick, right? Some other folks, I don't know, everybody's dying lately. I'm very saddened by it, but I feel like I need to give just some quick shout outs. And I wish I could get to everybody, but I just can't. There are people that I probably knew personally who are no longer with us, but obviously Cubs great Ryne Sandberg died last week. I guess he's probably in his 70s now when he died. I don't know. He didn't seem that old, but he seemed like he was, I can't remember if he played shortstop or second base. Seemed like a good dude. His name was Ryan, not Ryan. I'm sure he faced Nolan Ryan in his career with the Cubs there. But seemed like a good dude, great player, great memory, so we're sorry to see him go. And then last night, I got word that Lonnie Anderson from WKRP in Cincinnati fame has passed away as well. Remember, she played a flight attendant right before she went on WKRP. She played a flight attendant on Three's Company, one of Jack's many dates there. And Lonnie, of course, was married to Burt Reynolds for a time. That was kind of a big tabloid marriage, as I recall. But then you have, some of Burt's squeezes. Well, I'm thinking Sally Field is still going around. She's been around a long time, so she's still out there. But then Lonnie was that platinum blonde and just had, a certain look to her, and really sad to see her go. So pray all these folks are warmly received in heaven, and we will miss them. Again, people you grew up with or remember in some context, all of a sudden just aren't there anymore. So anyway, hopefully that's a pretty packed show. I think I'm going to go ahead and close it up here. Again, sharing is caring. I'd love for you to share the show with your family and friends and anybody that you run into. Hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'm also open to getting comments and even sometimes direct messages. I hope the direct messages are not bots. I've told the people about this concern before, but just thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. It means a lot to me. Seems like the numbers are going up slowly. I want this thing to be a big deal someday, and I think it is slowly taking shape. This and other plans in my life, and plans for significance and so forth. And hopefully you have those dreams and desires and pray about them as well. Not for me per se, but for yourself. And anyway, that's about it. So this is your host, Frank Weber. I'm going to sign off from the forest now on It's a Frankly Hairy podcast. See you again next week. Thank you. Love you. Bye.